will quickly identify Tech Executive One and his internet company with the details in this and other articles. Tech Executive One claimed in emails he was offered the top cybersecurity job in the U.S. government if Hillary Clinton won the election, while he was generating the data to frame Trump. Unbelievable. Talk about a conflict of interest. Tech One hired Sussman as his attorney for a matter involving an agency of the U.S. government. Seems a perfect lever to pressure that executive by promising help in that case with the government. Tea Leaves Originator One is a different person from Tech Executive One, but was a business associate of Tech Executive One. At the end of July, Originator One provided the initial DNS data to Sussman, who didn't give it to Baker until September 19, 2016. Sussman, Tech Executive One, and Mark Elias spent weeks coordinating their efforts with the Clinton campaign, deciding how to use this information to quote unquote demonstrate secret communications between Trump and the Russians. Now, this thread goes on, but we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to pass it over to Breaking Spectre. And, what do you think of this?
I would say it looks like it's a hot mess.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about the fact that the statute of limitations is running out? Supposedly, Durham runs out of funding, people are saying, on the 30th. I don't know. To me, it seems like they're going to after Sussman to maybe see why he contradicted James Baker, maybe put pressure on Baker. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's tough to say, but I don't know. I read a fairly decent thread too regarding Glenn Greenwald here today too. I thought he had a pretty good assessment of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you happen to catch it or no?
I did. It's in my article, actually.
Okay. Yeah. I almost sent it to you because I figured you'd probably write about it, being it's been written about so much. And I said, I bet she finds it anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It's just crazy. I mean, this stuff is frustrating because it's like, okay, but now what's going to happen, right? Like, we've known this stuff. I think that everybody has suspected this. Like, we went back and we looked at the old Q posts, and they mentioned Sussman. They talked about Perkins Coie and the DNC and how all this stuff was like laundered. And that was like years ago. So,
and I don't know either at the end of the day if it's a product of Durham or not, or if it was from Huber, because, well, I don't know. Huber was tasked with everybody that was in government, but is this guy considered that, being he was hired as part of, everything that, what's his name, that headed the special counsel? Boy, I've already forgotten his name.
Durham?
No, not Durham. Against Trump.
Oh, Mueller.
Yeah. So I don't know. And of course, at this point, the threat of Durham, to me, it's like smoke and mirrors. It's like a myth, whether or not that's going to happen or not.
Right.
But what still stands out to me is the fact that there are indictments still coming through. You can't fake that through Pacer, unfortunately.
Right. Which I verified today.
Yeah. And I mean, if you remember right when all this kicked off, we knew that Huber and 400 attorneys were sitting out in Utah away from the swamp, minding their business, letting us all run. And then all of a sudden we find out Durham had been brought aboard back in, late October 2017. And he started his deal, but we have never known how many indictments he actually added to the fray as part of that.
Right.
We have no idea.
That's true.
The indictments are there. The question is what is going to be done with them? Because we can't trust our just us system at this point. It's all going to have to come down in order to have true justice.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, how many of those indictments are literally just sitting there waiting to be unsealed? And are they going to be unsealed? I think it's very disturbing. But this is good news, though, because it opens the door to other people like Hillary Clinton, like some of these other associates of Sussman, like Elias. So I don't think, I think that this could be, it's good news, that's for sure. I don't know if we should be that hopeful though of like Clinton being rounded up or something.
Well, breaking, I brought up, before, would it be a strategy for them to basically make themselves feel comfortable that, oh my gosh, the statute of limitations are about to run out. We can breathe a sigh of relief. And then all of a sudden, all these charges keep coming up, cascading. I mean, that would be nice that they feel like they got out of it, but they're.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we got to get out of the mindset of that we're playing by their rules and the court system and statute of limitations, because I think at the end of the day, all of this stuff is probably rolling up into a RICO case,
Yes.
magnanimously sized RICO case, because that's what it was. It's like, what's the old saying? You got a riddle within an enigma within a whatever it is.
Is that outside of the statute of limitations?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
RICO is not.
No, because it's based on fraud.
Exactly.
There is
no. I mean, what I mean to say is that it doesn't matter about the statute of limitations if it's within RICO.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. Because it's an enterprise.
And it's the same thing I say to folks who have trouble understanding that, something can't be done about the election. Well, it's too late this, too late that. So what if Arizona does this, does that? Well, it's not in the Constitution. Well, that's all a bunch of bunk, because at the end of the day, fraud, vitiates everything. Ab initio. It's what it stands for. There are maxims of law that have been around long before this little piece of parchment paper known as our Constitution was constructed. Long before. This dates back to pre-Roman civil law. So to say that we don't have any remedies at law is bogus. And I would challenge anybody to say otherwise. Now, the question is whether or not we, the people, have the fortitude. That's another story.
Right.
Because it's not going to come by way of the courts. It's just not, unless we start yanking necks out of the courts and get these L's and black robes the hell out of there.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really want to investigate themselves. Given the chance to not investigate themselves, they won't. So you sort of have to force them to do something. But I would say there really are options. I mean, there's RICO, for example. That's just one. But the other thing, what about, things like treason?
All that would all go UCMJ then. Yes. And if that's the case, and that's probably, we knew back in 2018, early part of 2018, they sent a crew of guardsmen from Arizona down there to start building up Guantanamo Bay. Do we honestly believe it was really for a few guys that hung out in caves over in Afghanistan? Really?
Yeah. I doubt it.
So I don't know. We'll have to see how this pans out. It's, to me, it's like reading Patel Patriot's latest. I forget which it was called after Devolution Part 9. He had another piece here, but basically to me, it's both sides like trying to run out the clock here. It's a foot race to see who can run out the clock first. Is it going to be to the good with, what's going on with these audits or not? Or are we getting, for lack of a better term, railroaded by various folks in that who have co-opted and grifted the whole situation? Are we going to see anything out of that? Or are they going to try and run as far as they can, false flag this up every time that the good side starts getting a little bit ahead? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is true. Both sides are trying to run out the clock. That's certainly what it looks like.
Yeah, well, the bad part is, in my mind, and I've said this a number of times, there isn't going to be a 2022. I don't give a damn what the DNC says. I don't care what the RNC says. Forget about it. Forget about having a frickin' election. It's not going to happen until we, the people, get it done from 2020. And I don't care if that means burning damn voting machines down and turning them into prison bars, like Lindell said. It's going to happen.
Yeah, that you can't. How are you going to have any other elections like when they're all rigged? What's the point?
You
That's
can't.
so dumb. And I can't stand when conservatives say stuff like this, like, "Oh, let's just focus on 2024." Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
We're never
they're
going to
delusional.
win an election again. It's not just the voter fraud, like with the machines being rigged, it's the demographics also. They're literally replacing the voting population. They're importing mass foreigners that are not even American citizens who we know are voting illegally. That there, I mean, millions of them are being brought in
For that purpose.
Yeah, and then he's going to make, I guarantee Biden is going to try to make them American citizens so they can legally vote. Not even have to do it illegally, but now they'll be able to legally vote. They'll be made citizens, and then they have a total foothold in there. And so it just kills me. These stupid conservative Inc. Republicans, let's just move on. Let's just focus on 2024.
What is it called when you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results? Oh, a little thing called insanity. Yeah,
exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah, basically.
All right. So tomorrow's Friday. You guys taking call-ins?
Yes,
All
we will be
right.
taking calls. I can't believe this week has gone by so fast already. My goodness.
Yep.
Yeah, I have to get up tomorrow. There's a stupid hearing early in the Whitmer case that I'm not allowed to record and put the video out like in the Oath Keepers case. So I have to listen to it and I have to like quickly take notes and try to transcribe what's being said. And the quality of like the voice chat is horrible. It's horrendous. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure that'll be fun.
Well, take your little mini typewriter like the old court recorders used to do, the little stenographer, and type like mad.
Yeah, right.
Cool. All righty. Well, appreciate it, guys. I'll take her from here, I suppose. So see you guys tomorrow night.
Alrighty.
Take care, Pinata. We'll see you.
Bye.
Good night, guys.
All right, folks. It is Thursday, now the 16th day of September. As Radix just alluded, man, we are flying right along. Hopefully you guys joined us last Saturday for our roundtable that we had here. If not, yours truly did capture that in its entirety, and you can find that over on my channels for anybody that wishes to find them. Tonight, let's see, D-Live, good to see you folks over there. Of course, our folks over on Trovo, the redheaded stepchildren over there. Over on the old Tiger Network, over on the foxhole.app. Good to see you here this evening, Vaughn Live. And of course, don't forget about our folks over on Roku via Rumble, if you're able to watch either way. So that being said, let's get this thing rolling here and on down the road, shall we? All right. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you guys are doing well on this Thursday. Good to see you over on D Live, all you folks, fine folks over there. Antho Chris, Captain Roy D, good to see you. Shope, Vindication. Oops, thing jumped on me here. Vindication, where'd you go? 45, there we go. Bike Life, Inc. Chaz Otron, 600, Light Switch, good to see you. Fisher of Them. Let's see, Robin Ann, good to see you. Light Switch, Best Nani, End of All Wars, Mayberry NC, good to see you here this evening as well. And of course, over on Trovo, good to see you. Sheila W52, Sons of Liberty, Tech Chan, good to see you. Of course, Sunny Days, 85, John Quill, good to see you here this evening. Anybody else? Yeah, I think I pretty well got them. So, Snoopy Freak, got to see it pop in there real quick. So tonight, before I get started, a little bit of an update is kind of how I started last week. Oh, a little update on the old canning progress from the old garden here. If you remember my picture from last week, well, that turned into this. So all my little hot peppers, it's about 5 little pints, if you will, of some nice Tabasco peppers there, all canned up. That's probably about 300 there. And down in the bottom right, that's my little peppadews, a little South African variety there that, well, unfortunately, those little guys were supposed to be like sweet bell peppers. However, I do believe that my bees must have carried a little pollen back and forth from said hot peppers over to where the plant for the old peppadews were, and now they are also hot. So my seeds got slightly corrupted. Oh well, it is what it is. We'll eat them none the same, and I got a whole bunch more still coming. Aside from that, let's see here. I got some banana peppers net done up, and those, by the way, for whatever reason, did not get corrupted. Those aren't hot. Those are just regular old banana peppers there, and just getting everything all canned up, all by way of all the various peppers and whatnot here this evening. So lots more to go. Season's winding down, trying to get a few cold weather crops in, some beets and some cabbage, things of that nature. And we'll see how she fares. But tonight, like I said, I got a little bit of a hodgepodge of things going on here. I'm going to start off with an article about the old COVID hysteria out of Epoch Times that came through here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about big pharma and perhaps some corporations you never heard of. And by the way, what are some solutions now that old Joe came down with his edicts and decrees and mandates and everything else as if he's some sort of dictator? Well, we got a way to combat that. So tonight, COVID hysteria could destroy a generation. That's out of Epoch Times here today, or yesterday rather, says commentary. Initial stay-at-home orders and widespread closures were implemented in a state of panic and uncertainty as COVID-19 quickly swept through the world. Without data, these measures were initially popularly accepted. 2 weeks to stop the spread of a novel disease struck most citizens as more than reasonable. But as the months have dragged on, the ongoing implementation of lockdowns as a long-term blunt force tool has been an utter failure. With more data and information coming to light, many policymakers have failed to reinvestigate and reform their precautionary measures, thus increasingly acting both in conflict with science and in violation of liberties. Liberties be damned, right? They don't care about little things like that. This is especially true of school closures, as we accrued more and more studies and demographical data about how COVID-19 impacts children. The findings have largely been a blessing. The risk of COVID-19 to small children is astronomically low, and the risk of transmission between students and their teachers is hugely unlikely. After months of our kids suffering ill effects of lockdowns, this should have been a cause for celebration and impetus to cautiously but excitedly reopen our schools. And yet closures have continued to drag on in many areas of the country, much to the detriment of students and their families alike. Lockdowns have robbed children of a formative year of life, imprisoning them in their homes despite their negligible health risk. Basic socialization, formative lessons, and developmental milestones have all been stolen from them. Many working parents have been forced to double as teachers. Private schools remained open while public schools across the street were shuttered. Socioeconomic divides have been exacerbated. But for all the logistical consequences our children have faced from lockdown policies, our more consequential failure of them may very well be an ideological one. Our children look up to us, their parents, their teachers, their communities, to take the lead, to provide guidance, and in the process to instill the skill of rational decision making. But in the past year, amid pandemic hysteria, the adults around them have set a terrible example. Deference to authority has been the theme of the pandemic. Don't buy masks, they don't work. Now they do work, and your life depends on them. The lab leak is an alt-right conspiracy theory. Now it's likely fact. COVID transmits indoors. Let's close the public parks. Mom and pop shops better board up. But Walmart is open. Businesses are closed, but not for the politicians who need a blowout or gourmet dinners with lobbyists. The list goes on and on. Despite the contradictions, changing narratives, and blatant hypocrisy, many individuals have continued to toe the line. They dine for an hour at a dinner table in a crowded restaurant, but put a mask on to walk out the door. They have chosen blind deference and performative virtue signaling over critical thinking and individual autonomy. By following arbitrary rules and by failing to critically examine their own choices, adults have failed the children that look up to them when it mattered most. They have chosen a because insert authority figure here said so mindset over critical thinking. In the process, many parents missed a teaching opportunity. As the science developed and risk ebbed and flowed, the pandemic presented a great learning opportunity for young people. Critical questions abound. What is my individual risk? What precautions work? How do I protect those around me? What risk am I willing to tolerate? How do I operate a responsible citizen in a time of crisis? Opportunities to scrutinize the science, to analyze data, to engage with cost-benefit analyses, and to make wise, informed decisions were abundant. It was a teaching opportunity that many missed, but the children of cognizant parents will reap the rewards. We must admit when our initial policies have been wrong and reform them in light of new evidence. We must reject sweeping, unscientific regulations and embrace personal responsibility. Hello? Nicki Minaj called, huh? Whoops. We must exercise reasonable caution while engaging in critical cost-benefit analysis. If we continue to fail in this endeavor, we risk raising a generation that favors blind deference over critical thinking and herd mentality over personal accountability. Pretty well said there, and I think that's probably what many of us probably see playing out here. But was it ever really about health? Or was this all part of the coup plan over 4 years to get rid of Orange Man bad and, never letting a crisis go to waste? If by chance they can sneak in a Davos Great Reset deal, well, let's try that too. I mean, they've only had 100+ years to perfect the dumbing down of America via our education and everything else, right? And that's exactly what they've done. They don't want thinking populists. And that's why they're miffed when they see folks standing up for themselves at these board meetings and everything else, isn't it? Absolutely. Well, along those lines, here's something you probably don't know. Going back through the old archives here the other day, I remembered this article and been meaning to share this for a little while. But this dates back to March 30th of 2017. It's called Here Are the Most Profitable Corporations You've Never Heard of. And it has a lot to do with drug prices and everything else that we deal with our quote-unquote health care, basically our sick care today. It's nothing about health. But Mike Krieger out of Liberty Blitzkrieg had this to say. It says, when I first started becoming aware of how sleazy, parasitic, and corrupt the U.S. economy was, I only had expertise in one industry, financial services, coming to grips with the blatant criminality of the too big to fail Wall Street banks and their enablers at the Federal Reserve and throughout the federal government. I thought this was the main issue that needed to be confronted. What I've learned in the years since is pretty much every industry in America is corrupt to the core, more focused on sucking money away from helpless citizens via rent-seeking schemes versus actually producing a product and adding value. Unfortunately, the healthcare industry is no exception. Today's post zeros in a particular slice of that industry. A group of companies known as pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. Companies that seem to extract far more from the public than they give back. It's a convoluted sector that is difficult to get your head around, which is why we should be thankful that David Dayen wrote an excellent piece on the topic recently. Mind you, this is back March 2017 now. What follows are merely excerpts from his lengthy and highly informative piece, The Hidden Monopolies That Raise Drug Prices. I strongly suggest you read the entire thing, because there were a few highlights from the piece published in the American Prospect. Says, like any retail outlet, Frankel purchases inventory from a wholesale distributor and sells it to customers at a small markup. But unlike butchers or hardware store owners, pharmacists have no idea how much money they'll make on a sale until the moment they sell it. That's because the customer's copay doesn't cover the cost of the drug. Instead, a Byzantine reimbursement process determines Frankel's fee. I get a prescription, type in the data, click send, and I'm told I'm getting $1 or $2, Frankel says. The system resembles the pull of a slot machine. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. Pharmacies sell prescriptions at significant losses, he adds. So what do? Fill the prescription and lose money, or don't fill it and lose customers. These decisions happen every single day. Frankel's troubles cannot be traced back to insurers or drug companies, the usual suspects that most people deem responsible for raising costs in the healthcare system. He blames a collection of powerful corporations known as pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. If you have drug coverage as part of your health plan, you are likely to carry a card with the name of a PBM on it. The middlemen manage prescription drug benefits for health plans, contracting with drug manufacturers and pharmacies in a multi-sided market. Over the past 30 years, PBMs have evolved from paper pushers to significant controllers of the drug pricing system, a black box understood by almost no one. Lack of transparency, unjustifiable fees, and massive market consolidations have made PBMs among the most profitable corporations you've never heard about. Americans pay the highest healthcare prices in the world, including the highest for drugs, medical devices, and other healthcare services and products. Our fragmented system produces many opportunities for excessive charges, but one lesser-known reason for those high prices is a stranglehold that a few giant intermediaries have secured over distribution. The antitrust laws are supposed to provide protection against just this kind of concentrated economic power. But in one area after another in today's economy, federal antitrust authorities and the courts have failed to intervene. In this case, PBMs are sucking money out of the healthcare system and our wallets with hardly any public awareness of what they are doing. Even some Republicans criticize PBMs for pursuing profit at the public's expense. They show no interest in playing fair, no interest in the end user, says Representative Doug Collins of Georgia, one of the industry's loudest critics. They act as monopolistic terrorists on this market. Collins and a bipartisan group in Congress want to rein in the PBM industry, setting up a titanic battle between competing corporate interests. The question is whether President Donald Trump will join that effort to fulfill his frequent promises to bring down drug prices. Here's how it works. In the case of PBMs, their desire for larger patient networks created incentives for their own consolidation, promoting their market dominance as a means to attract customers. Today's big three, PBMs, Express Scripts, CVS Caremark, and Optum Rx, a division of larger insurer United Health Group, control between 75 and 80% of the market, which translates into 180 million prescription drug customers. All three companies are listed in the top 22 of the Fortune 500, and as of 2013, a JP Morgan analyst estimated total PBM revenues at more than $250 billion. The Pharmaceutical Care Management Association, the industry's lobbying group, claims that PBMs will save health plans $654 billion over the next decade. But we do know that PBMs haven't exactly arrested skyrocketing drug prices. According to data from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, between 1987 and 2014, expenditures on prescription drugs have jumped 1,100%. Numerous factors can explain that: increased volume of medications, more usage of brand name drugs, price gouging by drug companies, but PBM profit margins have been growing as well. For example, according to one report, Express Scripts' adjusted profit per prescription has increased 500% since 2003. And earnings per adjusted claim for the nation's largest PBM went from $3.87 in 2012 to $5.16 in 2016. That translates into billions of dollars skimmed into Express Scripts' coffers, coming not out of the pockets of big drug companies or insurers, but of the remaining independent retail druggists and consumers. Why haven't PBMs fulfilled their promise as a cost inhibitor? The biggest reason experts cite is an informative advantage in the complex pharmaceutical supply chain. At a hearing last year about the EpiPen, a simple shot to relieve symptoms of food allergies, Heather Bresch, CEO of EpiPen manufacturer Milan, released a chart claiming that more than half of the list price for the product, $334 of the $608 for a 2-pack, goes to other participants, insurers, wholesalers, retailers, or the PBM. But when asked by Republican Representative Buddy Carter of Georgia, the only pharmacist in Congress, how much the PBM receives, Bresch replied, "I don't specifically know the breakdown." Carter nodded his head and said, "Nor do I. And I'm the pharmacist." That's the problem. Nobody knows. The PBM industry is rife with conflicts of interest and kickbacks. For example, PBMs secure rebates from drug companies as a condition of putting their products on the formulary, the list of reimbursable drugs for their network. However, they are under no obligation to disclose those rebates to health plans or pass them along. Sometimes PBMs call them something other than rebates, using semantics to hold on to the cash. Health plans have no way to obtain drug-by-drug cost information to know if they're getting the full discount. Controlling the formulary gives PBMs a crucial point of leverage over the system. Express Scripts and CVS Caremark have used it to exclude hundreds of drugs while preferring other therapeutic treatments. This can result in patients getting locked out of their medications without an emergency exemption. And there are indications that PBMs place drugs on their formularies based on how high a rebate they obtain, rather than the lowest cost or what is most effective for the patient. Additionally, the Columbus Dispatch explained last October how, in some cases, a consumer's copay costs more than the price of the drug outside the health plan. But the pharmacy is barred from informing the patients because of clauses in their PBM contracts. They can only provide the information when asked. This excess copay goes back to the PBM. Absolutely disgusting and should be criminal. Game playing with brand name drugs pales in comparison to more profitable schemes for generics, which represent the vast majority of filled prescriptions, though they account for only about half of the revenues, since brand name drugs are so much more expensive. PBMs reimburse pharmacies for generics based on a schedule called the maximum allowable cost, but the actual number is hidden until the point of sale. The contracts are written in the form of algorithms, says Lynn Quincy, director of the Healthcare Value Hub for Consumers Union. It's not a list of drugs with a price next to it. Nobody knows what they're up to. The MAC list that goes to the pharmacy does not necessarily match the one for the health plan. By charging the plan sponsor more than they pay the pharmacy in a reimbursement, PBMs can make anywhere from $500 to $200 per prescription without either player in the chain knowing. While some spread pricing can be expected, the opacity of the profit stream masks the allegedly low-cost PBMs tout to health plans to get them to sign up. PBMs can also charge pharmacies additional fees months after a sale, direct and indirect remuneration fees were originally conceived as a way for Medicare to discover the true net cost of the drugs Medicare beneficiaries purchased through Part D by forcing disclosure of all rebates from drug manufacturers. But PBMs secured a key loophole, keeping their disclosure to the federal government confidential, while arguing that DIRs also legally apply to pharmacies. The PBM's use of these fees also harms patients and taxpayers. Consumers pay copays or deductibles for drugs based on the list price, without DIR fees or rebates that would lower them. And retroactive DIR fees are routinely not reported to Medicare, as PBMs call them network variable rates or pharmacy performance payments, and keep them for themselves. Obscuring DIR fees makes the net cost of drugs look higher to Medicare than they actually are. As a result, patients hit the donut hole coverage gap in Medicare Part D faster, forcing them to pay the full cost of their drugs. And it accelerates high-usage patients into catastrophic coverage faster as well, where Medicare pays 80% of all costs. All of this leaves subscribers and Medicare, in effect the taxpayers, to pay more out of pocket, as the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services noted in a January report. The question begging to be asked is why all the players in the market, plan sponsors, drug companies, and pharmacies, put up with a middleman that extracts profits from all of them. And the answer is the failure of federal antitrust policy. Consolidation. 3 years later, Optum gobbled up Catamaran, creating the current situation where 3 firms control 80% of the market. Brill adds that the big 3 carve up the market geographically, effectively not competing in certain regions of the country. Amid such concentration, plan sponsors have little ability to select the best PBM on price or quality. I just sat down with one of the big 3 PBMs. I had $500 million on the table, said Susan Hayes. They said, "Where are you going to compromise?" "Really? Where else do I bring $500 million?" And they say, "Where will you compromise?" With such monopolized control, PBMs offer pharmacies take it or leave it contracts with no opportunity to negotiate. These contracts employ punitive terms, including allowing the PBM to audit pharmacies, allegedly to ferret out waste, fraud, and abuse. Minor technicalities are used to extract money, said Susan Pilch, Vice President of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the NCPA. There are examples where you were supposed to initial on the bottom right of the prescription, not the bottom left. The PBM recoup all claims on that. Gotta love that free market. Other pharmacies have little recourse to fight back. PBM contracts frequently contain gag orders, preventing them from talking to local elected officials or disclosing the terms of the contract. Pharmacists complain of being threatened for mailing or delivering drugs to local patients, which would compete with PBM mail order operations. The combined toll makes it difficult for independent pharmacies to stay in business. This takes away a medical provider patients have used for years, said Representative Buddy Carter. I've had grandparents come to my store in tears and say, "I can't come here anymore." Worst of all, PBMs don't stop at legal money-making schemes. At his site, PBM Watch, attorney David Balto compiled 56 pages worth of state and federal litigation against PBMs. Just a handful of these cases yielded $370 million in damages for undisclosed rebates, artificial price inflations, kickbacks, steering, and other deceptive practices. Last year, Anthem sued Express Scripts for $15 billion, claiming the PBM violated their agreement by charging excessive rates for drugs. Federal agents from 2 states issued subpoenas for Express Scripts last fall, seeking information on the company's business practices. In January, diabetes patients sued 3 drug manufacturers for conspiring with PBMs to triple the price of insulin. PBMs may even have contributed to the worst public health crisis in America. Whoops, I guess this was obviously before today. Mind you, this is 2017. Non-COVID. The opioid epidemic. An investigation by Stat News found that Purdue Pharma, makers of OxyContin, paid off PBMs to keep prescriptions flowing for their product over the howls of a state employee health plan in West Virginia. In exchange for rebates, PBMs kept OxyContin on their formulary with low copays and without requiring prior authorization from the health plan to dispense the drug. Overprescribing of OxyContin laid the groundwork for a crisis that killed more than 20,000 Americans in 2015. Naturally, this won't prevent Jeff Sessions from blaming recreational marijuana. They were making a profit on people's addiction, which is freaking criminal, says consultant Susan Hayes, rubbing their hands with glee that people are becoming addicted to opioids. I can't believe it. Solutions? Another model would empower pharmacies. A 2016 report from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance highlights a quirk of law in North Dakota, which only allows drugstores to operate if owned by pharmacists. Similar laws exist in Europe. The law prohibits chain pharmacies from entering the state. Not surprisingly, North Dakota's independents deliver among the lowest prescription drug prices in the country, along with better health outcomes and more drugstores per capita than any other state. This flies in the face of industry claims that big chains and giant conglomerates save consumers money or improve services. Why can't this successful model be replicated elsewhere? The answer is PBM, says Stacy Mitchell, the report's author. Because in North Dakota, independents are the only game in town, PBMs have to negotiate with them. In other states, they have no leverage. Unsurprisingly, PBMs and chains want the North Dakota law overturned rather than adopted in other states. For a more immediate impact, we must turn to Washington. And their solutions often emerge when one large industry starts pointing the finger at another. Under fire for their many drug pricing scandals, from Martin Shkreli to Valiant, the pharmaceutical industry has tried to deflect blame by citing PBMs. GlaxoSmithKline CEO Andrew Whitty said in a February conference call that so much of the list price on the company's drugs went to non-innovators in a system which thinks it's paying high prices for innovation, a veiled reference to PBMs. An industry-funded report in January asserted that manufacturers took only 63% of gross drug revenues, attributing the decline to discounts and rebates paid to PBMs. Of course, this hasn't stopped pharmaceutical companies from earning higher profit margins than any other industry. Doug Collins, a third-term House member, experienced a PBM issue personally when his mother couldn't get her regular medication and her plan had no substitute on the formulary. I am a free market person, as conservative as they come, Collins said. When dealing with this, it's not a free market. Buddy Carter, his colleague, has worked in an independent pharmacies since 1980 and sees himself as their voice in Congress. I asked him if he had difficulty explaining the PBM market problems to his colleagues. Heck, it's difficult for me to understand, and I've worked in the industry over 35 years, Carter says. If the FTC determined the PBM market was anti-competitive, they could sever the relationship between PBMs and pharmacies through sanctions or divestiture demands. They could even break up the entire industry to generate competition. And the FTC has the power to demand the very transparency members of Congress and state legislatures believe is the key to ending profiteering. But this would require a radical shift at the FTC, which has often opposed state legislation to regulate PBMs or increase transparency. The FTC had argued now for over 10 years that lack of transparency is necessary because it can drive prices down, says Brill, citing recent FTC statements. Prices have not been driven down, and we need to take a different route. The wild card in all of this is Donald Trump. At his one and only pre-inauguration press conference, Trump singled out drug companies for getting away with murder, vowing to create new bidding procedures for Medicare and earning praise from the likes of Bernie Sanders. But when Trump met with pharmaceutical executives 2 weeks into his presidency, He focused more on speeding up new drug approvals from the FDA and cutting regulations than on reducing industry profits. This lines up with the perspective of a key aide, Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel, who wanted to overhaul the FDA process. In fact, the Republican Congress just overhauled the FDA process in one of the last bills signed by Barack Obama. Trump doesn't appear to understand the cost excesses in the supply chain. Trump did say in his address to a joint session of Congress that he would bring down the artificially high prices of drugs. And in his confirmation hearing, Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, discussing Trump's idea for competitive bidding in Medicare, said that right now the PBMs are doing that negotiation. I think it is important to have a conversation and look at whether there is a better way to do that. But where Trump's team will ultimately land is unknown. We need to get to the point of clarity about whether the administration is serious, says the NCPA's John Norton. Furthermore, any attempt to move forward legislatively on any part of healthcare policy will run headlong into the deeply polarized debate over the Affordable Care Act. While a bipartisan alliance appears possible on the PBM issue in isolation, it will be difficult to separate anything health-related from the Obamacare vortex. The PBM industry's leading trade group isn't sleeping on the possibility of an attack. Days after Trump met with pharma execs, the Pharmaceutical Care Management Association issued an internal memo leaked by BuzzFeed, stressing the need for building a political firewall in Congress to stop any legislative action. Frightened about drug manufacturers highlighting a bloated supply chain, PCMA CEO Merritt laid out a 6-point strategy that included meetings with White House staff and key members of Congress, a digital ad campaign targeting congressional leaders, partnerships with right-wing think tanks like the American Action Forum, and working groups to shape regulatory changes that make PBMs a savior instead of a villain. We will continue to show how competition, not government intervention, is a way to manage high drug costs, Merritt wrote, apparently without irony. Merritt even scheduled a meeting with the main health insurance lobby, AHIP, to make sure the payer community is aligned and coordinated. Only in America can 3 companies controlling 80% of the market be seen as competition. No wonder our economy is a total neo-feudal nightmare. And of course, much could be said about that in regards to not just the pharmaceutical industry, but big tech, big ag, big you name it. It's the same thing. It's all about consolidation, big banksters. We're not going to get the anti-competitive side of things, antitrust stuff done with the current administration, the people in Congress, et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to happen. Not going to come by way of court systems, any of the alphabet agencies. The government's not going to reform itself. It's going to come down to us. So that being said, what do we do? Well, flashing forward to where we now are, obviously a little bit different circumstances from 2017. Health crisis has obviously been manifest by way of COVID dominating everything here. How states and communities can fight back against Biden's COVID tyranny. And this penned by Brandon Smith over at altmarket.us. Says a war is coming. I have heard it argued that this war must be avoided, that it is exactly what the establishment wants. I disagree. I think globalists like those at the World Economic Forum certainly want enough chaos to provide cover for the implementation of their global reset agenda. But they don't want a full-blown rebellion. They only want events in which the outcome is controllable or predictable. They do not want a massive organized resistance that might surprise them. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because the war is already at our doorstep. A person has 2 choices: fight or be enslaved. There is no third option. There is no walking away. There is no hiding from it, and there is no passive solution to it. Joe Biden's recent declaration of a federal-level nationwide vaccine mandate has all but ensured that conflict is inevitable. Why? because it's the first major step towards a two-tier society in which the unvaxxed are cut out of the economy. The next step, forced vaccinations under threat of fines and imprisonment, the threat of confiscation of one's children, or vaccination at the barrel of a gun. Needless to say, this was not at all surprising to me. In December of last year, I published an article titled, "If You Thought 2020 Was Bad, Watch What Happens in 2021, stating that there will then be a major push to require medical passports proving a person is not infected to enter into any public place. This means submissions to 24/7 contact tracing or getting a new vaccine whenever ordered to. Basically, your life will be under the total control of state or federal governments if you want to have any semblance of returning to your normal life. New mutations of COVID-19 will be conveniently found every year from now on, meaning the public will have to get new vaccinations constantly, and medical tyranny will never go away unless people take an aggressive stand." I have also mentioned often in the past that Biden would institute federal level vaccine mandates and possibly even level 4 lockdowns. We're not to the point yet of lockdowns by executive order, but the Biden administration is trying to dive headlong into the control agenda with an executive order stating that all businesses in the U.S. with 100 employees or more must require those employees to provide proof of vaccination or demand employees show a negative COVID test weekly, which will be impossible for most people. In other words, the Orwellian rise of vaccine passports has officially begun in the U.S. Not only was Biden's announcement an utter violation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it was also condescending and vitriolic towards Americans who refused to become guinea pigs for the experimental and untested jabs. Biden suggested that the establishment has been patient, but their patience is wearing thin. I have to say, Biden is in for a shock if he thinks we care. I can't cover every single lie and logical fallacy in Biden's speech because that is not the purpose of this article. I can only once again point out some very basic logical conclusions and pieces of scientific evidence which debunk most of Biden's nonsensical blather. Since he seems to be so interested in why we are hesitant, let's go through this one more time, shall we? Number 1. The median death rate of COVID, according to almost every single medical study and every official government tally, remains at 0.26% of the infected. 0.26. Given that around 40% of all COVID deaths happen among people in nursing homes with pre-existing conditions, it is likely that the actual death rate is much lower. But let's just say that it is in fact 0.26%. Why is there any need to impose draconian medical controls over a virus that 99.7% of people will easily survive? Why not create a support fund for the 0.26% of people that are truly at risk so they can stay home while the rest of us get on with regular life? Number 2. Throughout the course of the pandemic in the U.S., the largest percentage of hospital ICU beds that have been occupied by COVID patients is 17%. That is the peak of COVID in the ICUs. For the past few months, the percentage has been closer to an average of 8% or less. This is according to the government's own stats, which the CDC now buries instead of posting openly for easy viewing by the public. So, when the corporate media or Biden claims that the ICUs are overwhelmed by COVID patients, dun dun dun, this is a lie. A new nationwide study of electronic hospital records on COVID patients also shows nearly half of COVID hospitalizations are actually people that are asymptomatic, not deathly sick people, as the media often portrays. Number 3. The experimental mRNA COVID vaccines have no long-term testing to prove their safety over the long term. At least none that has ever been released to the public. The average vaccine is tested for 10 to 15 years before it is approved and released for use in humans. The COVID vaccines were rolled out in mere months. Again, there is no proof whatsoever that the COVID vaccines are safe in the long term, and there are already a number of examples of lack of safety in the short term. Why would we trust an experimental protein spike vax that has nowhere near the same testing history as the majority of other normal vaccines? Number 4. Multiple studies in nations with high rates of vaccination, include a recent study from Israel, prove that there is no such thing as a pandemic of the unvaccinated. In fact, 60% of infection cases in Israel are actually fully vaccinated people. Furthermore, Israel has found that vaccinated people are 13 to 27 times more likely to get infected than people with natural immunity. And they are 8 times more likely to end up in ICU. These findings reinforce data released a month ago out of Massachusetts, where 5,100 COVID infections were fully vaccinated people and 80 of them died. In other words, the vaccines don't work so great, especially when compared to natural immunity. Number 5. Data from the Public Health England and the NHS shows that the vaccinated and unvaccinated have almost identical rates of infectiousness. In other words, a vaccinated person is almost as likely to give you COVID as an unvaxxed person. Now, let's present some rational questions in the face of this irrational COVID circus of fear. If the experimental vaccines actually work, then how are unvaccinated people a threat to vaccinated people, and why should unvaccinated people be forced to take the jab? If the vaccines don't work, then again, why should anyone be forced to take an untested and unreliable vax? Slow Joe argues that the vaccinations are safe and effective against COVID. But only seconds later, in the same breath, he claims that unvaxxed people are a threat to vaccinated people. He promotes the lie that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, then says the vaccinated are a danger. Even a child could pick up on the inherent contradictions in Biden's claims. As always, the issue of mutations is brought up in defense of 100% vaccination campaigns. But if mutations are the concern, then why isn't the government addressing the fact that a vaccinated population is just as likely, if not more likely, to create mutant variants of a virus when compared to unvaccinated people? Why are the unvaxxed being singled out as a supposed menace to society? The biggest question is, why should anyone submit to COVID mandates at all? Mandates are not laws. They are color of law, restrictions without legal merit. The bottom line, unconstitutional orders are not to be followed. This leads us to the state and local strategies for fighting back against the federal passport mandates. Let's get into it. Simply ignore the mandates and carry on with life as normal. How does Biden plan to enforce these mandates on businesses? If they refuse to go along to get along, what can he do about it? Who could he send to threaten or punish these businesses? Who would be dumb enough to follow that order? Does he plan to send the IRS, the FBI, the health department? Someone has to do it, right? And what happens when a business is threatened and a crowd of conservatives in the community come to the defense? What happens when local and state law enforcement get in the way of federal agencies? What is Biden going to do about that? Answer: nothing. At least not anything direct. The indirect method works both ways. If Biden is confronted with solid resistance to the passports in communities and states, there is really only one path he has left, which is indirect pressure through economic penalties. Biden will attempt to force states to comply by cutting of federal funds and tax dollars. This idea might terrify some people because there is a percentage of the population in every state that relies on federal EBT and other programs for their survival. However, the federal government can be punished in the same way, just as easily by the states. Let me explain. Confiscate federal lands and resources. Any state that is cut off from its rightful share of tax dollars can easily claim domain over federal lands and the resources on them. It is the EPA restrictions on these lands that have been unfairly used to kill numerous industries across the country. With proper management, these resources can be used to revitalize state economies and offset any federal funds lost. Touché. Take back the lands. The federal government is nothing lest it can enforce it by the butt of a gun. We'll take that land right off your hands, Nevada. Offer businesses federal tax exemptions if they relocate. Red states can also punish the federal government by stopping IRS tax collections within their borders and turning the tables on Biden. Numerous businesses would be itching to escape Biden's high tax rates and would bring jobs and wealth into red states, leaving the conformist blue states in the dust. Boot federal agencies out of the state or county. Local law enforcement is refusing to enforce mandates in many places, which is a good start. But eventually, sheriffs and communities may have to remove federal presence entirely in order to stop violations of civil liberties. Offer safe havens for military personnel that go AWOL to avoid forced vaccination. A large percentage of soldiers say they will not comply with federal vax requirements, and this is completely understandable, given the evidence I just presented above. It would be to the benefit of red states to offer protection for soldiers that leave the military based on the principle of health autonomy. Perhaps they could even help in forming state militias. Reduce restrictions on medical treatment facilities. Start vax-free clinics. 30 to 40% of medical professionals, depending on the state, say they will not take the experimental vax, and they are willing to lose their jobs in the process. Why not get these people with valuable medical skills to come to red states and counties and let them set up clinics outside of suffocating federal regulations? This may even reduce the prices on medical care in many cases. Form trade relationships with other free states. Conservatives and constitutionalists need to organize and unify, and the best way to do this is to start with trade. It is likely that Biden will attempt to interfere with imports and the supply chain when it comes to red states. So they will need to stick together economically in order to prevent disruptions to the availability of goods. We need to rethink how states interact with each other and build more independent production and trade instead of relying on overseas suppliers. We will also need commodity-backed banks with commodity-backed currencies because the buying power of the US dollar isn't going to last much longer anyway. Unify for defense. If Biden and the globalists continue to push for medical tyranny in states and counties that do not want it, there will eventually be calls for secession. There also will be attempts by blue states to restrict the travel of people from red states using COVID passport checkpoints. We all know this is coming. All conservative counties should be organizing localized security through public militias, and state government should be thinking along these lines as well. If there's one thing authoritarians hate more than anything else, it is suffering the existence of free neighbors. They will try to stop us from being free, and we must be ready to answer their violence with our own. Finally, I'd like to speak to Joe Biden directly, since Joe was so keen on personally addressing us. Joe, Let me clarify this in the simplest terms possible so that you can grasp it. You are not important. You are not a lawmaker, and you are not a ruler. You are not an employee of the American people. That is all you are supposed to be. And though you may wish to be a dictator, that's not going to happen. We will not allow it. I realize that you are a puppet and that your globalist handlers make most of your decisions and write most of your statements for you. So you can pass this message on to them as well. We will not comply. It's not going to happen. Get used to the idea. We are peaceful people and always have been. Our tolerance of our trespasses thus far is proof of that. But do not mistake our peacefulness as weakness. If you keep coming after us, you will regret it. We will teach you an important lesson in humility, a lesson you and your elitist friends sorely need and will not enjoy. This is a promise.
Amen.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry I ran over, but that one was worth reading right there.
Oh no, you're
That was
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah,
You're on fire today. Breaking, you're on fire.
Well, appreciate it. I'm sorry I ran over. Good to see you guys tonight. How we doing?
You're doing great. Wait, hey, come on, MAGA.
What? Whoa.
What? MAGA?
Man,
Wait a minute.
them sound effects. Them sound
I
effects
know,
are
but-
off.
Wait. Where's my neighboring state, man?
Yeah, come on, man. I'm just chilling and
There we go.
Oh,
I'm like, don't make me play the video.
All is right in the world now.
that's it, right?
That's
Oh,
So what's good,
All right,
Break
yeah.
Inspector? What are you thinking, man? What's going on in the world? A lot going on.
crazy business. I mean, if you look at just the stuff that I covered here tonight in regards to, the whole COVID shenanigans, Joe thinking he can just, get people to bow down and accept and take the jab. Well, I think I laid out a pretty good case there in that article. It says, well, they're getting a pretty good lesson on what the 10th Amendment is all about, because just like with the Arizona audits, they challenged Merrick Garland initially and says, yeah, go ahead and send your dudes down here. They'll get a nice jail cell waiting for them.
Yeah.
Of course, Merrick Garland now, you see, he's challenging Texas on their recently passed abortion stuff, and maybe Abbott will do the same. I don't know. But we're getting an exercise in what our Constitution is meant to do. When the government overreaches, the 10th Amendment is there. And if you have a decent state that stands up for it, apply it. And if the state won't, guess what? It's down to you and I, buddy.
100%.
So anyway,
comply.
we will
Yes,
not
exactly.
comply.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a great video. Langford was talking about that. He's like, the American people don't work for Joe Biden, and they have no right to do that. And once they release their paperwork that they're, about their mandates, then the court cases will have standing, and they're just going to get hit. I don't even know why they're even trying this. They know people are going to revolt. And they really think that he's going to tell people that they're going to put something in their body that they don't want. Does he
Negative
really
Ghost
think
Rider.
he really think that was going to work out? I mean, come on. This is the party of my body, my choice, but only when it's, something they
When
want.
it fits our narrative.
Only when it involves
Only
killing
when
the
it's
baby,
like,
okay?
involving murder. I was about to say only when it involves
Yeah.
murder.
But their whole
Yeah,
platform
totally
is.
okay.
But their whole platform is like that. They don't have anything good. They don't have anything to stand on. Nothing.
They
It's
are
all crazy logic. It's an alter universe that they live in. It's not
logic.
reality. Well, that's what I'm saying. There is none.
It's a fuzzy logic.
They are
That's it.
bereft and devoid of logic and reason.
100%. They're mentally damaged. There's no doubt in my mind.
100%.
Cool. Well, let me get out of your hair, guys. Let you get on with it. Take care. We'll see you.
All right.
All
It's
right,
great
thank
to
you.
Take it
speak with
easy.
you, man. Have a good night.